Hey guys, this is Miss Kendig here. Today we're going to be looking at IXL skill DD.2, finding the probability of simple events and opposite events. So, as you know, in DD.1, we did some things very similar to this. So, number 1 says, you flip a coin. What is the probability that the coin will land on heads? Write your answer as a percent. Now, what you want to do is you want to put the favorable over the total. So the favorable, so that means how many heads are on the coin, and there is one side that has heads, and how many sides of the coin are there? There are two sides of the coin. So now that is 1/2. But remember, it says write your answer as a percent. So we need to change 1/2 to a percent. The way we can do that is first change it to a decimal. Remember that the denominator, it goes on the outside and the numerator goes on the inside. It is 1 and we're going to add a 0.0. We're going to take the decimal up to the rooftop and we're going to say, okay, will 2 go into 0? No, it won't. Will 2 go into 10? Yes, it will. It'll go 5 times. 5 times 2 is 10. Then we subtract and we get 0. So our decimal answer is 0.5. Now to change it from a decimal to a percent, remember our little Q, we have a D to a P in the alphabet. To go from D to the P in the alphabet, we have to go to the right. So to move it from a decimal to a percent, you've got to go 2 places to the right, 1, 2, put a dot, and then you have to put a 0 in the little loop. So that would be 50%. Now, that's your answer for number 1. And I just want to remind you that this is not a document or a lesson on percent, changing fractions to percent. So I just want to remind you of some common ones that we use. Common ones would be 1/2, and of course that is 50%. 1/4, 1/4, and that is 25%. And then 3/4, 3/4, that is 75%. So those are some common ones that we use that you need to make sure that you remember. On to number 2. What is the probability of not tails? So what is the probability of flipping the coin and it not landing on tails? Write your answer as a fraction. This time it is a fraction or a whole number. Okay, so what you want to do is when you see something that says not tails, okay? So you want to say, okay, what is the probability of it landing on tails? Well, it landing on tails would be 1/2, right? Because there's one side of the coin that has the tails on it, and there are two sides of the coin. So, what is the probability that it is not tails? Okay, so what we need to look at is there are two sides of the coin. So, if one is tails, then one is not tails, and there are still two sides of the coin. So our answer would be 1/2. Now, while this seems very, very easy, there are some on the IXL lesson skills that you'll do that are a little bit more difficult. So I just want you to first start with what like in this case, the probability of it being tails, and then move to not tails. That'll probably help you as you go forward. All right, let's look at number 3. It says, you spin the spinner once. What is the probability that you will not land on even? So it will not be even. Write your answer as a fraction or a whole number. Now, we look at these numbers on the spinner, okay? So the number 5 is an odd number. The number 6 is an even number. And the number 7 is an odd number. Now, remember, even numbers are divisible by 2. So that means you can divide an even number by 2 and get a whole number. So what is the probability it's not even? All right, so let's do this. What is the probability that it is even? Okay, the probability that it is even. How many numbers are even? That's 1. Over how many sections of the spinner are there? There are 3. So 1 out of 3 are even. Now we can move to what is the probability that it's not even, all right? So let me kind of show you about this. This number in the numerator spot, if you take that number and you add it to the number over here in the numerator spot, it should give you your denominator. Okay, so what is the probability that it's not even? Well, what numbers are not even? Well, it would be the ones that are odd. So there are 2 of those. So how many sections of the spinner are there? There are 3. Now, what you want to remember is if you add the 2 numerators together, you should get the denominator. So in this case, we have 1, which is even, plus 2, which are not even. Then that gives us 3, and 3 is indeed the denominator. So the number, the probability that it is not even would be 2/3. And it did say a fraction, so we can leave it in that form. All right, let's look at number 4. What is the probability of spinning a 5? Write your answer as a fraction or a whole number. Okay, so what you want to look at now is how many sections have the number 5 in them? Well, there's only 1. So this is very similar to what we did in DD.1. So there's 1 that has a 5, and there are 3 sections, and it says leave your answer as a fraction. So there we go, 1/3. All right, let's look at the next spinner. It says you spin the spinner once. What is the probability of spinning the number that is not even? Write your answer as a fraction or a whole number. Okay, so we're going to underline fraction because that's a key word. Now, what is the probability of not even? All right, so let's look at all the numbers. The number 1, it's an odd number. The number 2 is an even number because it's divisible by 2. The number 3 is an odd number. The number 4 is an even number. Okay, remember if it says not, we want to go with what is even. So the probability of spinning an even number, that would be 2 because the numbers 2 and 4 are both even. So 2 out of how many sections are on the spinner? That would be 4. Now, remember we can't leave it as 2/4. We must reduce this. We can reduce it by dividing by 2 because both of those are even numbers, so we get 1/2. Now, 1/2 is the probability that it is even, right? So they wanted not even. Okay, so the probability of not even, okay, that would be, well, now remember, when you go back to this, the first fraction that we started with right here, when you look at that, we have to have the numerators have to add up to be the denominator. So how many are not even? In this case, that would be the numbers that are odd. How many are odd? There are 2. Out of how many sections are on the spinner? There are 4. So we would still divide by 2, and we would get the fraction 1/2. So half of the numbers are not even. So that would be the probability of spinning not even. A number that was not even would be 1/2. Now it says number 6. What is the probability of spinning a number that is not a divisor of 28? Now I want to share with you a keyword that means the same thing as divisor. We've talked about it, and it is factor. You've probably heard that word, factor. So now a factor is a number that will go into 28 evenly, right? With a whole number answer, no parts left over. All right, so what we want to do is we want to look for factors of 28. Now, this is the spinner still. We're using the spinner that is up beside number 5, and we're going to look up there and say, okay, 1. Well, we know there's something special about 1. 1 is a factor of any number. So 1 is a factor. So I'm just going to write, yes, it is a factor of 28. All right, the number 2. Well, 28 is an even number. So that means it is divisible by 2. You can divide 2 by 28 and you would get 14. So yes, 2 is a factor or a divisor of 28. All right, what about 3? 3 times what will give you 28? Well, there's nothing that 3 times will give you. If you multiply the number by 3, you will not get 28. So 3 is not a factor or a divisor of 28. What about 4? 4 times what will give you 28? Well, we know 4 times 7 will give you 28. So 4 is a factor of 28. Okay, now we want to know what is the probability of it not, or you spinning the spinner and it not giving you a divisor of 28. So what you want to do is you want to say, okay, well, let's start with what is the probability of getting a factor or divisor of 28? So what is the probability of getting a factor or divisor of 28? Okay, so this is where we're going to say, yes, how many factors or divisors are there? Well, we see there's 1, 2, and 4. Okay, so 1, 2, and 4. So the numbers 1, 2, and 4 are factors or divisors of 28. So there are 3 of them. Now, how many sections of the spinner are there? There are 4. But now, that is not what they wanted to know. They wanted to know what is the probability of spinning a number that does not or is not a divisor of 28. Okay, so we want to say, okay, the probability of not getting a divisor of 28. Okay, now remember, if 3 is the number on top, the numerator right here, then the numerator on the other one has to give us 4, because that's the denominator. So there is 1 that is not the factor of 28, and that would be the number 3. 3 is not a factor of 28 or a divisor of 28. So 1 over 4. Now it says write your answer as a fraction. So 1/4 is indeed our answer. All right, number 7. What is the probability of spinning a number greater than 4? Write your answer as a percentage. Okay, so this is changing on us, so we got to remember that. Now, what is the probability of spinning the spinner and getting a number greater than 4? All right, so let's look at all the numbers. Is 1 greater than 4? So is the number 1 greater than 4? No. Is the number 2 greater than 4? No. Is the number 3 greater than 4? No. Is the number 4 greater than 4? No, it is equal to 4. So, what is the probability of spinning a number greater than 4? Well, that would be, there's not a chance that you would spin a number that is greater than 4. So they want to know the answer in a percent. So that would be 0%. 0% would be the answer to number 7. All right, so let's move on to number 8. Moving on along to number 8. All right, it says you're going to pick just one moment, let me fix this. You're going to pick a card at random. So the blue cards are what we're looking at, okay? You're going to pick a card at random. What is the probability of picking a card that is not less than 8? Write your answer as a fraction. Now, this is one of those that will be much easier if we say, okay, first let's find the probability of less than 8. And then let's find the probability of not less than 8. Okay, this is where that's going to really play, and it's going to keep your mind straight on what they're asking. Okay, so they want the answer as a fraction. That's good to know. All right, so what numbers are less than 8? Well, the number 6 is less than 8, the number 7 is less than 8, right? So both of these are less than 8. All right, but 8 is not less than 8, it is equal to 8. So we cannot include 8. How many are less than 8? There are 2 numbers. How many total cards are there? There are 3. So the total number goes on the bottom. All right, so now let's look. We know that the numerators must add up to be 3, right? Because that's our denominator. So if 2 are less than 8, how many is not less than 8? Well, that would be 1, and that would be 1 over 3. So 1 out of 3 cards are not less than 8. All right, let's look at number 9. And for number 9 and number 10, we're going to use the purple cards shown there. Okay, you pick a card at random. What is the probability of picking a card that is not a divisor of 8? Write your answer as a percentage. Okay, that's important. Let's underline percentage. All right, so not a divisor. Remember divisor, another word is factor. Okay, so factor means that it will go into, divide into the number 8, okay, an equal number of times without having any parts left over. All right, so we know that. We just spoke about 1. 1 is a factor of 8 because 1 times 8 is 8, right? So yes, 1 is a factor of 8, okay? So it is a divisor of 8. And that's what we're going to go to first. What is the probability of choosing a divisor of 8? Okay, so 1 is a divisor. Okay, 2. 2 times what gives me 8? Well, we know that 2 times 4 gives me 8, so 2 is a divisor of 8. All right, 3 times what gives me 8? Well, there's not anything that 3, because 3 is not a divisor of 8. So you can't multiply any whole number by 3 and get 8. So 3 is not a divisor of 8. All right, and 4. Well, we know that 4 times 2 because we already talked about that back when we were doing the number 2. So 4 is a divisor of 8. So how many cards would you draw or could you draw that are divisors of 8? There are 3 cards that are divisors of 8. It would be 1, 2, and 4. And how many cards are there? There are 4 cards. So 3 over 4, if they ask us for the divisor of 8, but they want not the divisor of 8. Okay, so remember, if it's not the divisor of 8, then we've got to say, okay, the numerators, if 3 are, then there's 1 that is not. And there are still 4 cards. Now, but that is the fraction, and they want to know what is the percentage. Well, we spoke when we were doing number 1 about common percentages that we need to know, and 1/4 is one of them. 1/4 is 25%. 25%. All right, number 10. What is the probability of picking a card that is less than 4? Write your answer as a percentage. Okay, so we want to know what numbers are less than 4. So the numbers less than 4. Okay, is 1 less than 4? Yes. Is 2 less than 4? Yes. Is 3 less than 4? Yes. Is 4 less than 4? No, it's equal to. So we know that there are 3 numbers, and how many cards are there? There are 4 cards, but they want the answer as a percentage. So 3 over 4 is another common fraction to a percent that we need to remember, and that would be 75%. So the percentage of the probability of choosing a card less than 4 would be 75%. All right, let's look at number 11. You roll a 6-sided dice. What is the probability of rolling a number that is prime? Write your answer as a fraction or a whole number. Now, this is something that we need to remember. Remember, a prime number is a number that has factors. A number with factors of 1 and itself. Those are the only factors that the number has. So let's look at all the numbers, okay? So I want to remind you of the number 1. The number 1, that is neither prime nor composite. Now, what does composite mean? Okay. Composite means that the number has more factors other than 1 and itself. So I'm going to make that little note right here. Composite means a number with factors with more factors other than 1 and itself. Okay, so that would be composite. Now, they're wanting to know what are the prime numbers. So we're going to go through each number 1 through 6. Okay, number 2, the number 2 on the dice. Now, what are the factors of 2? 1 times 2 give me 2, and that's it. So, by definition, 2 is prime. What about the number 3? 1 times 3 gives me 3, and those are the only factors of 3. So, only 1 in itself. So, by definition, 3 is prime. Okay, what about the number 4? Okay, we can say 1 times 4, and we can say 2 times 2. So, because the number 4 has more factors other than 1 in itself, we know that the number 4 is composite, and I'm just going to abbreviate. All right, so now let's look at the number 5. What about the number 5? Well, we can say 1 times 5, and there are no other factors, so by definition, the number 5 is prime. What about the number 6? 1 times 6, and we can say 2 times 3. Those are both factors of, those are all 4 factors of the number 6. So it has more factors other than 1 in itself. So this one, by definition, is composite. All right, now, of the 6 sides of the dice, now, so we know the 6 is going to go on the bottom, right? Because that's the total number of numbers on the dice. All right, now, how many are prime? So let's go and look. The number 1 is neither prime nor composite, so that's not prime. The number 2 is prime, the number 3 is prime, and the number 5 is prime, okay? So there are 3 out of 6 numbers that are prime. So what we want to do is, they have a number in common. We can simplify this fraction by dividing by a factor that will both go into 3 and into 6. So we can say, okay, that is 3. So 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. So our fraction is 1/2, and they did want us to keep the answer as a fraction. All right, so number 12. All right, what is the probability? Now, this is still dealing with the dice. What is the probability that you will roll a number that is not even? Write your answer as a percentage. Okay, so what's the probability that it is even? Okay, that's a percentage. We're going to underline the word percentage. Okay. Now, so what we're going to do is we're going to look and say, okay, let's say how many are even. Well, let's write these out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So how many are even? We know that 2 is even, 4 is even, and 6 is even, right? And we know that 1 is odd, that 3 is odd, and that 5 is odd. Okay, so how many are even? That would be 3 out of 6. And how many, what's the probability of not even, which that's what they want, not even, right? Okay, so that would be, there were 3 that were even. There are 3 that are not even, because not even is known as odd. So there are 3 out of 6. Now remember, we cannot leave it as 3 out of 6. Just like on number 11, we had to say, okay, let's reduce our fraction, divide by 3, and when we do that, we get 1/2. But now we underline the word percentage, right? So we need to think now what 1/2 is a common fraction to a percentage. So we need to remember that that is 50%. Okay, and remember percent is out of 100. So half of 100 is 50. Now you are able to log on to IXL and do skill DD.2.